In today's episode, we'll be diving deeply into digital wellness and what it means. The pursuit of a healthy relationship with technology is becoming increasingly important as the way we live, work, and play changes. With many jobs relying on internet access or digital devices for communication, it's critical that users learn to manage their screen time wisely so that they can maintain an active lifestyle without overdoing things either in their personal life or professional career. The goal of digital wellness isn't simply about making sure you're not addicted, but it's rather about creating routines where your mind feels secure when you're surrounded by these technologies 24/7, which often provides us with a constant state of stimulation from social media posts to breaking news, gaming apps, and so much more. Now, by understanding how to create balance in your digital life, you can keep technology from overloading your brain and causing ourselves unintended harm. Today, we have a special guest who's helping us change the curve and win back our joy in some astonishing, fun, and unique ways. So I ask you to kick back and listen to his fantastic story. All right, this week's guest on What the Tech is not just any old technology founder. He is committed to being a catalyst to building the future of children's digital wellness. He's also a professor developing and teaching a signature play-based curriculum at Stanford. And he has actually opened a wild consulting career because of that with the Fortune 500. Additionally, he's also the co-founder and of a co-viewing and co-doing platform built by storytellers and educators where viewers actually use their phones and tablets as game controllers to really easily interact with the program and one another and the environment around them. So all of this to say that it is my great pleasure to introduce and conduct an interview with Roger Manix. Roger, thank you so much for coming on the show with me today.
Yeah, you got it, pal. Thanks for having me. Thanks for the intro.
Yeah, what a blessing. You know, you and I have had some, in our short time together, some really fun conversations already. And I really just have gotten to know you, kind of the rich depth of who you are and kind of where a lot of this is coming from. And so I'm excited about this conversation, first of all. And second of all, I'm excited to maybe go deeper into some of those things you've already at a baseline shared with me. Now, I wanted to start it off with what I consider kind of an awkward question because it doesn't necessarily have everything to do with what we're talking about today. But it does have something to do with, I think, your history and background, which has led you to where you are today. And that's your history in acting. And so what I wanted to ask you, and the reason I wanted to go down this direction is because I like to have kind of a little bit of a dialogue or kind of a fun play along with my guest at the beginning of each show as really an icebreaker. And so what I wanted to ask you, Roger, just to have a little bit of fun with this, is a few questions like you were on a late night TV, like you're a famous actor and you're kind of going through this with Jimmy Kimmel or, you know, name the person. Does that sound fun?
Yeah, you're my Jimmy Kimmel. Let's do it.
All right. So first question. So before you get in front of an audience, like I've heard that a lot of people have like quirky things that they do or rituals that they do. I was curious, do you have anything like that, you know, before you get up in front of an audience, whether you're teaching or you're doing some sort of production? It's my understanding you've been on TV. Is there anything that you do kind of consistently that gets you in the zone?
Yeah. So there's two things I do, these are really strange, and I'm going to be saying these to a public forum, and then people are going to hear this for the rest of my life and maybe long after my life is over. So there are two things. One is I used to be a yoga teacher. Okay. So I'm an avid practitioner of yoga. So I do something called left and right nostril breathing, which balances the hemispheres of the brain in order to have you be more grounded and centered and have your brain working more in tandem with the hemispheres working together. And then the other thing I do, which is a very strange thing to do, is I pray before I go on stage. I literally am like, God, be with me, get rid of my ego, show me what to do.
That's amazing. You know, it's funny you mentioned the praying because I was watching your TEDx video And you talked about I think your own Bermuda Triangle. As you grew up, I think in the three different Catholic schools in your elementary years.
Yeah, two Catholic, one public.
Oh, it was one public. Okay, uh, that's uh, that's funny. And honestly, I love the idea of you praying beforehand because that's really what grounds me. With my faith and like I think that realizing that I'm not in control of everything, right, and that I'm just going to try to put my best foot forward and leave the rest to God is a really comforting thing for me.
Absolutely, right. And trust the process, right? Go be of service.
Yeah, you've been practicing, right? Trust the process too. Next question. So, with all of your experience and background, would you prefer to be like in a big feature film or would you prefer to be in something a little bit smaller or more intimate?
Yeah, the second for sure. That interests me. Some kind of intimacy, profound, bringing a group of people together, small, to go through an experience. There's something about the live theater. Well, it's live and it's been going on for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. And there's a reason why. There's an essayist named Barry Lopez, and he says, when stories come to you, care for them because sometimes a person needs a story more than food to stay alive.
Wow.
And there's something that I understand about that, because really, what are we? We're made of story. That's who we are. Right? We are all of our memory. We are story people, right? We don't just give facts out like a computer. They're embedded in our stories of who we are. So intimacy.
I love that. Yeah, there's something deeply touching about a story. And I think of all the great movies in my mind that tell a fantastic story. And I think in some cases, I was watching some older movies recently. We've gotten away from really good storytelling. I think we depend too much on
Spectacle.
spectacle. Yeah, that's a good point. Spectacle and honestly, uh, some deplorable stuff that's out there that I think is really also getting away from the spirit of even entertainment in general. Is that you should walk away from it feeling good, right?
Yeah, 100%. Absolutely. I went to go see Kinky Boots the other day here in New York. A friend of mine brought me as a gift, and there was such exuberance in the theater. And there was a father behind me who happened to be there with his gay son. And at the end of the show, and if you know the story of Kinky Boots, just Google it. At the end of the show, the father had said, "It's really important for me to see things like this so I can help understand my son a little more." And I thought, how profound, like how beautiful that like the theater or a story can help a father love his son a little more deeply, that it can impact a relationship, a human to human experience where there's more acceptance instead of just derision and walls between us that are being built. And I believe entertainment can do that, which has a lot to do with my company as well too.
Yeah, and I think we are at odds too often, and there's mediums like entertainment that can help bring us together. And I hope that more and more of those sorts of things continue to come out. Just like the technology company that you're building, you're trying to build community, and play and all the things that seem to be taking uh, you know a step back in a way in our current environment where isolation becomes more and more prevalent.
Yeah, isolation is the new disease.
Yeah, yeah. Great point. So one more question around the theater. So
Yeah.
any funny audition stories you'd be willing to share?
Funny audition stories. There's a memory that comes to me that's a funny theatrical story. Is that
Okay.
all right?
Yeah.
In my undergrad, in my last year, I was in Dangerous Liaisons. I don't know if you know that play, or it was made into a movie with John Malkovich and Glenn Close. So I had the lead, and we had to sword fight. So for a good 2 months, I learned how to sword fight. And before the show, we always had to have a fight call, which means you meet your person you're going to fight with, you practice before the show, and you go. Well, he got a little close and he cut my face, and there was no understudy. So I had to go on, and every single person's costume in the play was brilliant white. And I make out with like every woman in the entire play. And as I'm going through the play, all I'm seeing is my blood dripping down people's dresses, people's faces, in
Oh
one
my.
person's hair. And I was like, and then throughout the show, I kept having to just kind of get rid of the blood on my face. That's a funny story.
Well, it's one that you'll never forget.
Yes.
My goodness. For
Bleeding for art.
yeah, bleeding for it was a bloody mess. It was a bloodbath, right? Well, that's certainly an interesting story. You know, and the fact that you didn't have an understudy makes it even more interesting because the show must go on, right?
Oh yeah. They were like, put a band-aid on that thing, suck it up and get up there, mister.
Oh wow! Oh wow! And you know what? I'm sure everybody like acted like it wasn't a big deal. You probably, you probably were like more conscious of it than anybody else.
Totally.
You
People were in the
know,
audience and they were like, we didn't really even notice what you were talking about. It's like, oh, thank God.
oh, fantastic story. Thanks for sharing that. Well, let's dig into
Yeah.
digital wellness. I think it's such an interesting and diverse topic. We can go a lot of different directions with it, but I wanted to start off with why. Why is it important that we consider our digital wellness, and why, in your mind, is it worth exploring for just average people and for kids and parents and like everybody who's really had technology really thrust on them if we're not mincing words.
Yeah. So before I answer that question, I want to say that technology is miraculous
Mm-hmm.
in terms of it allows us to do what we're doing. It brings people together. It helps save lives. Like technology is really incredible. But like one of our partners, we're advised by the Digital Wellness Lab at Boston Children's Hospital. Dr. Rich often says that technology, smartphones in particular, tablets, computers, they're like a car. You wouldn't put a kid in front of a car without ever teaching them responsibly how to use it. It's like a power tool. It is. So there needs to be a consciousness around how we use it. So I want to be very clear that I'm not poo-pooing on technology at all.
Right.
I'm simply saying that we need to have almost like a warning label, like cigarettes or alcohol has on it, that there should just be a real consciousness of how we use it. So why is it important? Well, since the smartphone came out in 2007, there's been a directly proportionate relationship in the increase of ADD, ADHD, depression and anxiety together in kids. The DSM, is it the DSM-5 that lists all the kind of illnesses
Mm-hmm.
that are out? They now list digital addiction in there as well too, where we need to be, a child's brain is really forming in those first 3 years, big time, of development. I think they say something like 80 to 90% of a child's brain forms in the first 3 years of development. And if we're putting technology in front of a child with all of these quick flashes and changes, a child can't make sense of a narrative per se, right? They can't
Right.
put the story together, but what they're getting hit with are the sort of quick flashes of light and quick cuts, which really activates a part of their brain that makes them crave more and more and more of that. So I believe that digital wellness is going to be a topic that will be relevant now and for years to come. And honestly, like Troy, I'm sure you have this in your life. I have never spoke to a parent yet who's like, oh, I don't really care about that, or the phone isn't an issue in my house, or we don't talk about technology. It's an
Mm-hmm.
issue everywhere.
Right. Yeah, it's not only an issue everywhere, but I think people are looking for ways to supplement technology with something else, and we've almost forgotten what it's like to go outside for some people, because there's just a busyness. There's almost like a demand for our time and to be in front of technology for our day-to-day lives. um, but there's plenty of opportunities out there to use it, I think, wisely, and I think you're showing some different ways to do that, that doesn't necessarily have to be as damaging, because I don't think that there's going to be less technology next year because there's a
No.
problem. I think there'll continue to be more and more technology, but how do we balance those things? And I think you've talked a lot about some ways to do that. Um, but let me ask this: so you've given us kind of a why, right? Because there's obviously a trend in especially in the younger generation, because they didn't experience play the way that you and I did, without technology, without computers that we would spend hours and hours on. I certainly didn't see anything like that when I was 2, 3, 4, 5 years old, and the shows that my parents watched were not that exciting or interesting, and they weren't curtailed just to me. I had to wait till Saturday mornings to watch a lot of them that I wanted to watch. So things like that. I mean, there were just bumpers on the lanes for kids, of my day, that there was nothing better to do than to go outside and do something, whether it was go play basketball or ride your bike or just go to the park and swing on the swings, where kids just have a limitless supply of entertainment, whether it's video games or movies or YouTube videos or podcasts or whatever. Like, it's endless. There's
Yeah, and
like
it's designed to keep you in it, on it the whole entire time. I always say it's like Vegas. You just want to keep pulling and pulling and pulling because it kind of keeps you in this opioid loop to kind of keep staying engaged with the content. There's never been, we've never had our living rooms or TV sets in our back pocket 24 hours a day. We would leave the living room and go into the day, but now the living room comes with us kind of everywhere we go.
right.
So, of course, there needs to be some sort of pediatric guideline around how to introduce screens into young children's lives. What's the best way to go about doing that? I mean, the World Health Organization, the American Academy of Pediatrics, they all say limit screen time to about an hour for like kids 2 to 5. But, in the US, that's like 2.5 hours or more a day. Children from lower incomes, that's like 4 or 5 hours or upwards a day. So clearly we need to have some sort, clearly parents and caregivers need help
Right.
on, well, what do I do? What are the best practices and how do I put them into play? And that's exactly what my company does with its combination of technology and storytelling together to support parents, right? And giving them a tool to support their child's digital wellness through both clinical and preventative care.
Yeah. And so let's talk about what the major benefits of that. So, like, I was looking at some of the statistics that you had shared on the website of Immersiva, right? Did I say that right?
Yeah, you got it.
When I was reading it, I was like, man, that sounds a little more challenging to say, but I wanted to make sure that I got it right. But I was fascinated by some of the statistics. When you take technology in the right format with the right delivery system and what it can do for especially young minds, right? In comparison to the endless supply of games and YouTube videos and things out there that are meant to keep you like fixed and addicted to the screen.
Yeah, for sure. One of the term that's coined now in the medical world is PIMU, which is problematic internet and media use, and that can really affect a kid's sleep, their social functioning, their mental health, their physical health. When there seems to be a problem with excessive smartphone tablet use or PIMU, those kids are 8 times more likely to have depression, 9 times more likely to have anxiety, 14 times more likely to have both. So what we've done is we've taken these pediatric guidelines that are out there in the world, which are, you know, media, like a child. First of all, media should never be used to comfort or regulate emotion in a child. So the guidelines, according to the Digital Wellness Lab, the WHO, the AAP, is when you're watching media with a child, don't put them in front of something all alone by themselves. Watch it with them, and it should be interactive, meaning engage the child in conversation, relate what they're watching to the real world, pause it, give them something physical to do at the right time, really bring them out and be there with them at the same exact time. And that's ideal, because I get that a parent has to do laundry or like cook dinner sometimes, and you're going to, and like the iPad is there, or
Right.
Sesame Street or Daniel's Tiger is there. I'm not saying that all of this is bad. We're talking about best practices. And if you can set kids up, you know, with understanding that media is a way to actually bring us together, to foster human connection. It's not a place to have a passive, sedentary, and isolated experience. We can set them up for success with their digital hygiene as they grow older. I mean, you shared a really great story with me right before we got on there about that kid getting his technology taken away, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was amazing. I mean, I was watching a video of a young. Well, he was 12 years old, and he basically, you know, the phone was taken away from him, um, and he had basically, in their absence, because they had left with the phone, destroyed the entire house. I mean, this kid had ripped cabinets off of the kitchen, cabinet. He had kicked a hole in the TV, punched holes in the walls, shattered their glass table in the living room. Like, there was nothing that he hadn't destroyed in that house, because
Mm.
and I liken that and I know the science supports this, but I liken that to a drug addict, like that is in withdrawal. And I've seen that personally with people around me, because of my past experiences and things like that growing up. That people that lose control of their faculties and their ability to stay kind of medium in situations, because there's a chemical imbalance, and some technology, when abused, creates those same exact triggers in people. And it's tragic, right? And
It is.
the best part about it, outside of mental illness, I think it's avoidable.
Yeah. As long as we can, which is again what we're trying to do here, I believe that, okay, I can get a bit, listen, the philosopher Emerson, right? Emerson says, to know that one person has breathed easier because you have lived, that is success. We have a responsibility to support our children in the best way that we know how, so they can thrive as they grow up. We have never been in a position before where kids are given this device at like 1 or 2 years old. There was not too long ago, there was on one of the morning talk shows, they did this experiment where they took children who were just learning how to crawl. And at one end, they put their caregiver, it was often their mother. And at another end, they put an iPad. Some of the kids had never seen an iPad before, some of them had. The mom was at one end and she was saying, come here, the caregiver calling, and the iPad was on the other end. Not one child went to the caregiver. Every single child crawled to the device. Every single one.
Wow.
I find that really disconcerting. I want to create a place where we put the human first. What we've done at Immersiva is we've taken these pediatric guidelines and we've put them into practice through storytelling, meaning we have built technology that can turn any existing or future media properties into co-viewing, co-doing experiences. We create a syncing state between mobile devices and what they're watching in order to promote human interaction. In essence, we get people online to get them offline.
Wow.
We actually give them fun things to do. We engage them in conversation. We have them talk about moments where things at school were really hard or a moment that they felt joy. We bring them away from the screen, and then we bring them back to the screen to help unpack it. And then we set them up in order to continue that learning throughout the day, the weeks, the years away from the screen.
That's incredible. So tell me how that like works exactly. Like, is it that the platform asks a question, or go ask your parent this, or like how do you pull in that engagement off screen, so that they're looking up and they're not just getting a continuous stream of input?
Yeah, so I want to say something that's kind of funny. When a parent or a caregiver goes to like a pediatrician and they're like, "Can you please talk to me about digital wellness, digital hygiene?" 9 times out of 10, maybe 10 times out of 10, what they get is a PDF with bullet points that says, "Ask your kid questions, don't leave them alone." And caregivers are often like, "I get it, but how do I do that?" Well, we're actually giving them the thing to do.
Right.
So for your listeners, you can go to www.rogersworld.tv. There are 3 episodes on there, one about creativity, one about collaboration, and one about resilience that you can actually see and experience. It's meant to be watched between a child and a caregiver. And often those episodes are designed for kids specifically 5 to 9 years old. What we're working on is 2 to 8 years old, but that's what we tested our beta with. So, and specifically to answer your question, my work is all around play and the neuroscience of play and the learning science of play. And why do we play? So embedded within the programming, there's moments that we instruct the viewers to actually kind of step away from the screen and play with one another and then come back. There are moments when we're engaging them in conversation, where we're asking them things around true, false, or multiple choice, or fill in the blank, or crossword, and then they have to maybe answer that on their device, and it gets answered here. We ask them questions that everyone fails in life. That's how we learn.
Mm-hmm.
And we have the adults say to the child, "Hey, can you share about a time in your life when you failed at something or something was really hard? And how did you get through it?" And then we have the kids say, "Can you share about a time at home or school where something felt really hard?" So we're bringing in a connection between the two of them. And it's really beautiful because it allows the adult to almost revisit their playful spirit and, for lack of a better word, heal their inner child or bring their inner child to the experience. And it gives the kid a moment that really kind of humanizes the experience between their caregiver and themselves. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And how many families out there don't really talk about things like that naturally? And so it does, create an opportunity for dialogue where even maybe a caregiver doesn't even think that, like, to ask something like that, right? Like, what a healthy way to kind of create some dialogue. Because for the most part, I mean, there's nothing wrong with Daniel Tiger. There's nothing wrong with,
No.
Blues Clues or, any of the stuff that's out there, because primarily it's educational. I mean, I learned a lot from Sesame Street back in the day, right? But again,
Same.
it's all input. And so your platform is giving them an opportunity to take maybe something that they're hearing or listening and ask questions and dialogue and communicate with the people that should be most important in their lives.
Yeah, and it sets up the habit in the child to start thinking, "Oh, I use this technology in order to connect to people."
Oh, I love that. I didn't even make that connection, but yes, I love that.
Not to disconnect from people. I'm actually experiencing this show. Like, we can, like I said, we take any media property, whether it's old that's sitting on the shelf or something new, and put it through our system, and we turn it into these pediatric approved interactive experiences. So now the child understands, wow, I get to connect more deeply with Grover or whoever.
Yeah, right.
And I get to connect even more deeply with my caregiver. One of the researchers at the Digital Wellness Lab had said to us, she said, "I'm a researcher and I have a 7-year-old kid. So of course I'm going to put your product to the test
Right. Do
before I even talk to
it.
you. So I'm like, yeah, bring it on. So she did it. And at the end, she had said, she goes, I asked him, I said, hey, did you like that? And he goes, I loved it. And she said, why? And he said, well, because not only did I get to play with Roger, but then I also got to play and talk to you as well. And then in that episode, we play a game called This Is Not a Stick. And this
Okay.
woman had said, and the woman said, the next day we were in the kitchen hanging out. And my son said to me, Mom, let's play This Is Not a Stick. So she said, I knew you were up to something because what you taught stuck. And my kid didn't say, oh, let's go back and watch that show again. My kids say, Mom, play with me. See the
That,
difference?
yeah, I see the total difference there. It's not
Good, good, good.
let me go play my game, and ignore the world. It's mom, let's play. Let's play this new game that we learned together.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And
Fan-
like, and connect and find the joy in that. You know, the TED talk that I recently did was all about joy and how do we find joy in one another through playing.
Yeah, no, I'm interested in exploring that a little bit more, but I also wanted to talk about your time kind of teaching at Stanford. You were specifically focusing like on emotional and social intelligence with play-based learning, correct? Is that
Yeah,
right?
I was.
And so, like in a academic format like that, like what was kind of the approach, and what kind of was the feedback that you were getting from the people you were educating on this kind of, I would say, emerging kind of field.
Yeah, I think I need to give a little bit of context to that. So it was 2008, and I had just earned my master's in acting. And I don't know if you can recall what a stellar year 2008 was
It
to
was
have
a
a
really good
master's
one.
in
I
anything.
remember everything was burning.
But it wasn't a good year to have a
Yeah.
master's in acting. I can tell you that much. I was 35, 6 years old. I was $100,000 in debt. I was cleaning
Oh wow.
basements in Brooklyn for $25 an hour. And I had an idea. A friend of mine taught at the Graduate School of Business at Stanford. And I said, I want to come out there and teach the development of emotional and social intelligence to your MBA candidates, because I think for them, in order to survive the fear that they're graduating into in this economic crisis, that they're going to have to need these skills in place. And I like to use
Absolutely.
play to do it. And I did. And I went out there and I just studied the brain and how we learn. And honestly, it was a hit because people crave connection. People want to feel connected and joyful to one another. And of course, play is a dirty word in the work world, because if you're not getting an extra zero on the paycheck or a plaque on the door, the work is looked at as frivolous, right? But the amount of skills that play works on, collaboration, resilience, innovation, social skills, people skills. I mean, I can go on and on and on. 89% of new hire failure isn't because someone lacks the hard skills to actually execute that job. It's because they don't play nicely with others. So there's a
Right.
reason why we do that stuff. So that was the beginning of a career. And I was a recurring guest lecturer at Stanford for 6 years. So I would fly back and forth out there. And then it just opened up this very wild career with the Fortune 500. I now teach at Parsons School at the New School, and they asked me to develop a course to teach empathy using play.
Mm.
We teach empathy, you know?
Yeah, I think empathy is something that is honestly hard to find these days. I think primarily it might be because of some of the things that we've experienced in recent history and so forth, but it could be the isolation. We don't know how to empathize with people. It doesn't come naturally to us anymore. I do think I've met people, Roger, that are naturally empathetic. And then other people can learn it. It's something that you can learn, right? On how to
Yeah,
do
I
it.
think a lot of it has to do with our upbringing and our communities and or our churches and or our schools and stuff like that. I do. But the thing about empathy is, you're not going to learn it in an HBR article that with a checklist, because it doesn't work
Right.
like that. Empathy gets, because you're not going to be like, oh, look, I did that at work today. Empathy is learned by experience, right? It's learned through actually doing, practicing in real time. That's how that part of the body, the limbic system, really learns.
Yeah. Great point. So how does one teach an adult to play?
You're always going to have contempt prior to investigation, right? That's
Right.
always going to happen, right? So the course I teach is in a global executive master's course of management and design. I just actually taught not too long ago in Paris. And it's very disorienting, bringing people to come together in particularly a global executive master's program. And they're like, am I playing all weekend? This is what I just spent $70,000 on. And then slowly what they realize is oftentimes there's tears because they have forgotten what it feels like to play and deeply connect with people. And I mean, play is the original teacher. It's nature's greatest gift. That's how we all originally started to learn, was by playing with one another. But somewhere along the line of our education, someone had said, cut it out, grow up, don't do that anymore, sit down. I think something's wrong with our classrooms as well, too, and this very industrial revolution, desks forward, lecturer-centered experience. That's a whole other podcast that I'm happy to be on and talk about. I do think that play for this generation is this. My phone is off. This is play. This is the new playground, right? It's a digital playground. So let's meet people where they are. If that's the playground that they're at, how can we use that playground to support them, to put people first? Mm-hmm. To have human connection come from that first. And oftentimes, the reason how adults sway over to play is because at the end of it, it feels great, right? There's an energy, a vitality, a spirit, something happens. We're like, wow, I completely stopped doing that. And it's really great for caregivers and kids to do that together.
I'm curious, of corporations and people and things like that, like you may have gone into this with this, like, I know this works and I believe in it. But were there epiphanies for any sort of corporations that you've engaged with or things like that they were like, I'm not so sure about this, and now they're calling you back every single year to be engaged, or things like that? Because I do think that the Industrial Revolution, or whatever it is, has made us very rigid in the way that we do work, and play has certainly exited that. But I do think that there are certain industries that have a little bit more. Example, Google used to be my client, and they have a very interesting kind of like work experience that they do. They have rock climbing walls, and like chefs that come in 3 days, 3 times a day, and they've got like these giant candy centers, and get whatever you want. And they've got games all over the place, and it was very unique. I was like, it was very different than what I had experienced in other roles. So I think there are certain organizations that embrace the idea of playing, which obviously creates a lot of creativity in the minds of people. But have you had any situations where they felt one way, they were willing to give it a shot, or you got a little bit of pushback from a corporate standpoint? And what did that look like in the end?
Yeah, sure. As a teacher, I'll say from one perspective, I remember the very first time that I kind of taught this, or one of the first times that I taught this at the GSB, there were 11 people in this cohort, and 10 of them liked it and one of them didn't.
Okay.
And I spent the majority of the time focused on that one person, trying to convince him and get him over. And I completely forgot about the 10 other people in the room. And that was a really big learning lesson for me as a teacher. You know what I mean? Right. Of like, it's not necessarily my job to convince people. They're there to have an experience.
Right.
I could tell you a fascinating story about one client where they had two parts of their business, like an agency side and a sales side. And I play this one game called Family Portraits. And, you kind of say words and they have to kind of act them out. I won't get into the specifics around that.
Well, you did that in the TEDx. So,
watch the TEDx. Oh, yeah. So do that. So something was rotten in the state of Denmark, but we couldn't put our finger on it within these two areas. So we played Family Portraits. and we did it with the agency side. And one of the words were, "You are the manager family," and they all went and hugged each other in like seconds. And then I said that exact same word in a different session to the sales team, and I said, "You are the manager family," and without missing a beat, within seconds, they all went up there and pointed guns at each other.
Really?
So do you see how telling that is? Because
Yes.
when people play, their natural habits and tendencies come out. Why? Because they're playing, they're acting on impulse, they're not thinking about it. And at that point, they're in a bit of a free play and a state for them to give you pieces of information that maybe they wouldn't be giving you otherwise. So in that moment, leadership then looked and thought, I think we found the problem. So play can be it can be a great diagnostic tool.
Yeah, I mean, it was telltale. I would say that it was telltale about their culture in that
Oh
part
yeah.
of the business, right?
Yeah. It was great. It's very rewarding. It's very rewarding for me. I'm older now, so I used to spend a lot of time really frightened of my work. Not frightened, but ashamed, not ashamed of the work. I spent time wondering if people would like it.
Would get it.
Is
Yeah.
this a joke? What are they? I rarely think that now. I think because it's been so many years later and I'm a little older and I know that it works.
Well, you have a little more track record, but at the time, back in 2008, when you were really thinking about this, it wasn't so prevalent. It wasn't mainstream. Now we're hearing that there's been so many studies about this
Oh, yeah.
That we know that it rings to be true. What you're sharing, what you're saying, that EQ is now more important than IQ, right? So you were kind of, on the tip of the spear there at the time you were thinking and talking about it, but now you've kind of seen that not only does it work, but ultimately the world is coming around to seeing the truth of the matter.
Yeah, and I throw one more thing in there too. I think EQ and IQ are we need both, and I also think
Sure.
we need LQ, which is I call the love quotient. And I think that as a professor, my classrooms are loving, Mr. Rogers, Bell Hooks, these are heroes of mine. And I believe that when we infiltrate learning with an air and a quality of love and care, that is the best environment for a learner to learn something. So why we have a responsibility to foster that love through media, because that's where a lot of people in the world are right now. So why not use that in order to create a beautiful balance between IQ, EQ, and LQ?
Right. Yeah, LQ is, I think, super powerful. And you mentioned Mr. Rogers. He was somebody who, on screen or off screen, was exactly the same person and showed love and consideration to everybody. And what a great hero to have. To just be completely honest. So yeah, I do think LQ is probably, it's more powerful than any of them. Because if you're loving somebody, you're not thinking about what you can get from them. You're not thinking about all the things that may be in the way of potentially, I don't know, how do I say, like we're, I think as human beings, we're so narcissistic. Let's just be honest. We're all about ourselves, and that's why the boom of social media, has happened. We're always looking for ourselves in pictures first. Like, how do we look? How do people see me in this? Right? Like, that's just our natural. But if we're loving people, we're not thinking about that. We're thinking about how do we put this person first.
Yeah, of course. And when you talk about love in like the business world or school, I get some dirty looks,
It gets a
right?
little
Because
weird.
it's like, why are you talking about? Can we just get the bottom line met here, people? Can we just kind of focus on that stuff? But when you focus on this other stuff, the bottom line gets met as well too. And when you focus on building that love up, listen, could you imagine, like, if our children of the world felt loved and seen? If that was the world that we were created through media, where we gave them an opportunity to connect more deeply to their people around them who care and love for them, and they grew up with those kinds of skills and self-esteem in place, what a world
What a
we could,
world.
and it's possible to do that.
It's definitely possible, and you think about the people that grow up in loving homes and things like that. They're far less likely to be involved in drugs or dangerous acts of criminal behavior and things like that. So many kids grow up without fathers nowadays, or in just a one
Mm.
home environment. Like and the impact that has. You just look at the statistics. There's no way to deny the fact that that has a negative impact on children when they don't have because one parent might be working two jobs, just so they're having to entertain themselves, feed themselves. And so how important is it that that love be prevalent in those relationships? So I just think you've got something going there. I'd never heard LQ. I don't remember hearing that in something that you shared with me, but I think it's just as imperative as EQ or IQ on the spectrum of things that make us human and make us better.
Yeah, I agree.
Great touching on that. So I always like to ask, kind of to sum up the show, Roger, three things, if you're talking to people about digital wellness, and you had three objective actions to take, and maybe even one to avoid when you're thinking about these things, like what would you say that those are for, for your work?
Yeah, three do's. I mean, I have a lot of these. I think the first do that I would love to have all of us do is pause. Pause. Like when you're going to reach for the phone or the whatever it is, just have a moment of pause of like, oh, like, do I actually need that right now? Or do I not? Or is it, involuntary? That you're reaching for it. I wrote a book about this stuff, and one of the things we studied was we would have students check their phones at the door, and then the students would report back that during class they would reach over to their knapsack constantly, and they're like, but I knew my phone wasn't there,
Right.
but I just kept reaching to get it. So I think pausing is one. I think the second thing is, if you happen to be a caregiver, right, ask yourself, right, is this an opportunity for me, with my child, to engage them in a different way with something that they may be watching? You can watch rogersworld.tv, right? Is there an opportunity for me to engage with them more deeply than right now putting them in front of the device? Because as I said, sometimes dinner has to get cooked. I'm not
Right.
talking about those moments, right? And the third do is, ask yourself, I believe that joy is about being connected to the people and places in one's environment that inspires well-being, delight, and pleasure. I encourage us to be joy seekers. Where is your joy today? How do you find joy today? And how do you uplift others in that process as well? My one don't, I would say, is, this is a really silly one, but don't, don't, this is personal. Don't check your phone first thing in the morning when you wake up. Just like give it 5 minutes. Just see what it feels like. Oftentimes the world's not on fire. You don't need to do that. Instead, open the window, look outside, have a moment of connection to something else. But simply I don't bring devices in my bedroom at all. And actually, I was off social media for quite some time. But when I did the TED Talk, they encouraged me. They're like, you kind of have to have a social media presence, which I understand. So my don't is, don't get on that phone first thing in the morning when you're waking up.
Yeah. Don't make it the first thing. It's really good. It's good advice, and I think it's certainly advice that I think we all can hear and take. The busyness of the day will be there, right? You don't have to start too early. Well, fantastic! I like incredible stories, incredible advice. I love the work you're doing. I think it's making an impact. I always like to ask, my guests, Roger, where can they find you? Potentially, reach out and see you. You have some YouTube videos, the TEDx videos as well. But, what's the best way to kind of engage with you as well as, what you're doing?
Yeah, you bet. So, you can find me, Roger Manix, on Instagram and reach me that way as well too. You can also find us through our company website at Immersiva.co and find me that way. I think those are the two best ways
Great.
to reach out because I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, I love it. Well, thank you so much for being on the show with me today. It's been a really good one. And if you liked the show today, make sure you boop that like button and hit the subscribe button to be notified of future episodes. And I'm actually looking forward, Roger, if you would at some point come back, because I think that there was so much we didn't explore today that we could definitely explore. So I'd like to do this again sometime.
Oh, I would love to. Thank you so much for having me. The work you're doing is really important in the world. I look forward to coming back again. Thanks a lot, pal.